Today, I'm announcing that our government is exploring the feasibility of a tunnel under the Highway 401. I know this is an ambitious idea, and that some people will say it can't be done, or that we shouldn't even try. But these are the same people who oppose every project.
The tunnel is a proposal by the Premier, and I think questions about it should be to him. Both the Mayor and I have a really good relationship with the Premier, and I know if he has any ideas that he wants me to get involved in, he'll send me a text, and then we'll give each other a call.
Send a text, give me a call. Well, will it be Toronto's version of the big dig that we saw in Boston? If you didn't know about it, that one took 16 years to complete, and it was 5 times the original cost, landing on a price tag of nearly $15 billion. They took an elevated highway, put it underground. But will shovels even break ground on Toronto's tunnel? And is that a signal that Premier Doug Ford is getting ready for an early election? Let's bring back the front bench. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Gurratan Singh, and Rachel Aiello. Gurratan, we're going to start with you since you used to sit in Queen's Park. So what does the prospect of the tunnel mean for a possible early election in Ontario? Because we know that they have fixed election dates there.
Well, I think that the only real indication that this announcement makes is that an earlier election is on the horizon, because the prospect of building this tunnel is nothing but fantasy. This is something done, I think, to create some excitement, maybe in the face of, we just saw the Angus Reid polling that demonstrates that Ford is now one of the least likable premiers in the nation. So I think this is in response to try to maybe galvanize folks in Ontario around some big idea, but it's effectively a dream. A project of this size would be astronomical. It'd be, longer than the tunnel between UK and France. Like, this is a really gigantic project. And most importantly, we know that right now when people are talking about the struggles that they're facing, we're talking about access to healthcare, to doctors, towards schoolrooms that have proper infrastructure. There's so many other things that the Premier should be investing in that he's not. And so I think this is just one of those, create some excitement before a potential early election.
Melanie, just because we love stats, or I love stats on this and this kind of crazy research. So this tunnel would be 55 kilometers long from Mississauga to Scarborough. The longest tunnel in the world right now is in Norway at 24.5 kilometers long. So it would more than double that. Do you think that this is a trial balloon by Doug Ford?
Well, I think that the one issue that all Canadians think about when they think about what does government do, it's build roads. If you aren't talking about building roads at any level of government, then the people just don't know what you're doing if you aren't doing that. And having lived in both downtown Toronto and in the suburbs of Toronto and commuting in, the traffic is unbelievable. It takes an hour to get anywhere. The DVP is literally flooded 2 months out of the year. The Gardiner Expressway is constantly closed for construction and lane management. It's impossible to get around. So I think that people living in the GTA are thrilled that any idea is being considered. It's a feasibility study. Obviously, they're going to look into what is possible. But ultimately, this is a city where we're now internationally known for being terrible with traffic management. Niall Horan came and did a concert in downtown Toronto. He had to walk from his hotel to the concert because he couldn't get there in time otherwise. Tom Cruise has said on a red carpet, what's going on with the traffic in Toronto? When international celebrities, that's their one takeaway, is that traffic is terrible in your city. That's not a good look. And so obviously politicians need to be doing something in order to fix it. And so the government has a bold plan, a bold idea, and people have really gotten behind it. The Toronto Board of Trade is really excited about this. And then also the trades themselves, that we're seeing unions come out and say, this is really exciting. We can't wait for the jobs that this is going to create.
I mean, exciting, Sabrina, but at the same time, is it kind of just obvious what this really is? To the point that everybody is making, I think, on this is, it's tough to think that this is actually going to land somewhere, that the shovels may start in the ground, but a 55-kilometer tunnel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just surprised that Conservatives even like tunnels, because in Alberta, Danielle Smith took away the Green Line funding because she didn't like tunnels. So this is refreshing. I think at the end of the day, Doug Ford knows his audience, he knows his voter, and he knows what their struggle is. And the struggle is traffic, as Mel said. Like, everybody is talking about how bad the traffic is, and it's such an annoyance to the everyday life of somebody commuting in the GTA. So I think, it's almost irrelevant as to whether or not this tunnel gets built in this, vision or this like dream scope that Doug Ford is proposing. What matters is that he's actually trying to solve a problem that he knows people are experiencing, and he knows that his voters are experiencing. I think at the end of the day, probably it's not going to be 55 kilometers. There still needs to be a feasibility study done. Even the Taxpayers Federation came out against the price tag on this. And so I think it's going to be reduced in scope. What I found really interesting, though, is that when he released this plan, cabinet members and caucus members heard about it for the first time at the press conference. And so I think that that's an interesting tactic that I don't really understand. If you're going to call an election, why you're not bringing in the rest of your party into something that's such a big, potentially exciting announcement.
Yeah, and Rachel, I mean, there's no doubt that maybe he's dipping his toe in the pool, flying a trial balloon, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, at a certain point, he's got to look at the calendar, because there are a number of other elections that are happening or expected to happen.
Yeah, talk about a traffic jam. We're kind of in a situation of potential election traffic jams. We've got what's going on in British Columbia right now. They're going to the polls October 19th. New Brunswick going to the polls October 21st. So I'm sure Doug Ford is watching what's going on in Ottawa, this new instability of when could the federal government go to the polls. And all of this is having to be taken into consideration, not just because of there being bumping up elections, but what it means for voter confusion. I just cast my ballot. Now, who am I voting for? Some of the messaging, making sure that people aren't fatigued by this election conversation and tuning it out. But then this other consideration I think all of the parties have to make is, where are your volunteers right now? If they're tied up in another federal or another election, or, they've just come off of one and they want a bit of a break, if you don't have those people to go out and door knock, those volunteers to go canvass, that is consideration as well.
And especially when you consider in the next election federally, for sure, or every election, it's all about getting out the vote. Yeah. And you need those bodies there. So it's not like you can pull on them.
With excitement and energy. Yeah. And a snap vote here doesn't give a lot of time for federal parties to get gears going and running. Candidates nominated, really strong ground games in place. And so certainly I'm sure Ford is trying to get as ready as he can to maybe squeeze in before the federal government falls, probably watching and hoping maybe secretly that Jagmeet Singh keeps this going a bit longer, enough for him to get in. We'll see. I'm sure there's a metaphor in there about like merging lanes and passing traffic, but I'll save that for you.
He's put on his signal. He's hoping that at one point that somebody will let him in. You know what? I'm just eating up time now, because we got 30 seconds and I can't give it to any one of you, because I think one of you will use a traffic analogy.
Is it a red car or a blue car?
Yeah, or either. Anyways, okay. We're going to leave it there. And I'm just going to take a longer time to say goodbye to Gurratan Singh, Sabrina Grover, and Melanie Paradis. Thank you all for being on this Friday Front Bench. Have yourselves a great weekend. Rachel, though, is going to be sticking around. She'll be back right after the break with a look ahead to the week in Parliament. Stay tuned.